The Water Diviner was fixated into my mind the moment I read about it. The directorial debut of Russell Crowe, my second most favoritist actor, who also stars in the film? Not to mention the story was something that also intrigued me heavily. An Australian father traveling to Gallipoli after the First World War in order to find his 3 sons missing in action? Oh man, I was hooked right away. But there was one problem. I had to wait 4 long, bloody, grueling months longer before I could see this movie, as even though the film was already out in native Australia last December, it wasn't going to get a theatrical release in Canada until April 24th. But the movie is out now, and coincidentally it ended up being released a few days after the end of my exam hell period, making for a just too conveniently timed end to the school semester. But how is The Water Diviner? Did it live up to my 4 months of hype? Was the wait justified? Well, to a certain extent, I'd say yes. The movie is overall pretty good, I'd say, but flawed enough to prevent it from being a truly great film. As stated, the movie stars Russell Crowe, here a grieving Australian father named Joshua, who ends up traveling to Turkey in 1919 after his wife commits suicide out of guilt in order to search for the remains of his 3 dead sons that fought at Gallipoli so they can be returned home and buried as a family. However, Joshua meets opposition by a country whose culture he does not understand, and the occupying British Army that refuses his request to join the ongoing search effort. Through his journey to find his missing children, he forms a mutual surrogate father-son relationship with a young Turkish boy Orhan, as well as an uneasy following with his widowed mother Ayşe, and a strange camaraderie with the Ottoman Major Hassan, who goes very much out of his way to help Joshua find his sons. Alongside the main story involving Joshua are a couple subplots involving the joint tentative Turkish and British effort to recover the fallen of the war, the brewing Turkish nationalism and continued fighting with Greece, and Ayşe's brother-in-law's efforts to coerce her into marrying him. All the stuff you'd expect to see in such a film is done beautifully. The cinematography and visuals create a perfect depiction of the death world that is Australia, as well as post-war occupied Turkey just prior to Mustafa Kemal's revolution. In particular, the brief flashbacks to World War I trench warfare in Gallipoli are some of the nastiest and most grueling war scenes I've ever seen. I mean, if parts from Fury made you a bit queasy, you may want to look away during these parts. What's also great is the acting, but then again, what else would you expect given the cast? Russell Crowe is in top shape as always, and he plays the role of the grieving father, still clinging to hope, just as well as you'd expect. But the showier roles go to Yilmaz Erdoğan as the guilt-ridden but determinedly nationalistic Major Hassan, but especially to Olga Kurylenko as the widow Ayşe. You know, Quantum of Solace gets a lot of crap that I really don't understand. I actually think it's a really good movie, and I think that Olga was a huge part in why it is so. So I'm glad to see her in another great role. And even if she unfortunately just ends up as a second chance romantic interest for Joshua, it's still taken in ways you may not expect given the cultural background and practices of the Middle East. Jai Courtney also appears to be having fun as Lieutenant Colonel Hughes, the delightfully obstructive military bureaucrat, and Cem Yılmaz goes into a lot of depth even as the more reserved Sergeant Jamal, compared to Erdoğan's Major Hassan. The biggest issue I have is unfortunately the directing. Crowe is not playing it safe here, and I can tell the work has a lot of passion behind it, but that's also kind of the issue. Way too often, the film shifts tones from, say, serious drama to lighthearted playfulness, then back to heart-tugging, which goes to a funny diversion, etc., etc. All the individual scenes are done really well, except for one instance of painfully obvious auto-tuned singing.
Told you I don't know what you're talking about.
Can I hold this out for a minute? Crap.
I mean, a couple of the beats were okay, but auto-tuner?
The auto-tune is up. The auto-tune is terrible.
But the issue is that many of them just don't mesh together that well, and it ends up turning what could have been a nice juicy steak into just a pile of hamburger. Still tasty, but lacking the cohesiveness of a more high-end product. But all the hamburger does add up to an easily identifiable theme of forgiveness towards injustice and willingness to move beyond the past, things that are echoed by each of the main characters. I don't know if Crowe is just not suited for directing, or if he just needs more experience, it's too early to tell, but it just feels like the film would have worked better with someone more seasoned at the helm. All things considered though, The Water Diviner is still a good film, with great acting, great visuals, and a gripping story, if just all stuck together with what accounts to bubblegum, duct tape, and the will of the Force. See you next time.